You may or may not be familiar with the MG5 Estate, a fully electric car with just over 60 kilowatt hour battery, a little bit under that for a usable, and a range of somewhere between 3 and 350 kilometre range. But what's possibly new in your world is the fact that you can get it as a van. Not that you'd be able to tell necessarily from the front of it, especially because it just looks like a standard MG5. There's a couple of trim options in the passenger version of the car, but MG have probably rightly so figured that you're not really going to be bothered with that. So there's these Aero 16-inch alloy wheels. They also claim that if you drive this car just in the city centre, which perhaps a lot of vans will spend their life in, you could achieve a range of over 500 kilometres. It does seem quite a stretch from a 61 kilowatt hour battery, but they're claiming it nonetheless. There isn't really any proof that this is a van from the back either, because it says station wagon, SW and EV, which the passenger version does. MG have decided to put wipers on all their cars now. There was a time when the MG4 was lacking one of them, and a manual boot to reveal 1,300 litres of boot space, which by anyone's imagination is quite a lot of boot space. Something else that I think will appeal to a lot of potential buyers of this in a commercial vehicle is the fact that you can open the side doors like a standard passenger car. Gives you 3 ways to get in. While I'm not suggesting that the main purpose of this car will be to carry bodies, but it gives you an idea how much space is in the back of this thing when I can fully stretch myself back here without any problems. I even have a bit of head height, if that is part of the priority for you. The amount of space. Now, some versions of this car I've seen have an MG cage here, which is branded. Not in this vehicle, but to be honest with you, the MG logo is so big, it's probably just a bit too much. It's a good job for the exterior, at least, that it isn't a Miss Universe competition, because the MG5 probably wouldn't do particularly well. But you know what, on the inside, it's really fine. The seats are really comfortable. Got plenty of head height. Black high gloss all around the cabin gives it a passenger car feel. You got this 10-inch screen, which is pretty easy to use. Clearly displays what state of charge range you have left. And the driver instruments are also very clear. And you get cruise control and its radar. You get an armrest, which is quite deep. Bit of extra storage under the centre part of the housing, which also controls your regen. So it's just labelled as cars. 3 different settings on that. Not a one pedal mode, but as I said, 3 levels to bring the car to a stop when you're driving. And yeah, the plastics aren't the most expensive, but they look okay. The MG5 was never a slow car to begin with. This is 156 PS, so a little over 150 brake horsepower, and even going down this hill now, it's putting some regen back into the car, especially as I'm in that 3rd level of regen braking, as I mentioned here. So when you floor it, like, it's properly quick, especially because this car has lost a bit of weight, losing the rear seats. Now, that's not to say you're never going to put some payload into it. I do appreciate that, but it should be a nippy enough car. Now, it's front wheel drive, so if you have loads of weight in the back and it's trying to get grip in the wet, possibly something that companies like On Post could use, and they've certainly been open to that over the last year or so, purchasing quite a few ID Buzz Volkswagen cargo models. The standard car is also quite comfortable, and it's the same for this, even more so with these 16-inch alloy wheels, because there's so much room on the tyres. It really is quite comfortable, and it's a quiet car. Now, the panels on the insides of the doors do create a bit of a blind spot when you're trying to see over your shoulder. What you are guaranteed, though, is a smooth ride. It just glides along in a very comfortable way. Even over these speed ramps, you do hear more clunks because you have less insulation in a commercial vehicle, but it tackles them with ease, and you're not really shaking around going over the speed bumps. If I'm being particularly critical and fussy, the steering wheel doesn't feel like the most premium of products. The thing a lot of people possibly don't discuss enough when it comes to EVs is how cheap they are to run. If you're running a small business and you need a commercial vehicle such as this, it's going to be cheap to buy, but there's no escaping from the fact that it's going to be cheap to run. And you'll be able to charge this car for a little over a tenner at home or in your business, depending on what rates you're paying there. But just your average unit cost of electricity at maybe 25 cents a kilowatt hour, you're talking in and around that kind of money. And that is a dent taken out of what is probably typically a diesel bill. Now, it's a shame that the government still, as we are just a few months away from 2025, don't really incentivize people to go electric in commercial fleets. And perhaps that will change, or they'll just tax diesel people to high noon to try and discourage them from buying diesels. But it is an important part of ownership of a car like this, and it shouldn't be underestimated how cheap you could charge and run one of these for on that basis. Needless to say, it drives just like a car really when it comes to handling, and it actually was never really a bad car. And something else I think most people will be able to relate to is when you see a taxi in a certain type of car, it gives it a seal of approval, I suppose. Think of what happened with so many drivers picking up Skoda Octavias in the past. And the MG5, albeit in its passenger estate form, is definitely a car you see around the place being used as a taxi. And again, probably the price is part of that, but still, you wouldn't see taxi drivers getting into the second and third versions of them if they weren't useful. No doubt, a bit of an ugly duckling, but not a bad van and not a bad emissions-free way of going about your business if you manage to get an MG5 in a commercial. The main reason for filming this video today was to show you that this is proof that there's less and less excuses not to go electric these days. And while they're not for everybody, and it's not necessarily a van I'm saying sales reps should cross the country in, day out, because you'd probably be driven them into trying to charge it. For a city centre or, an urban environment, maybe a vet. I'm just trying to think of the different options and things you could get into the back of one of these cars. And when you whip the VAT off the price of it, it can make it quite an interesting vehicle to get around in. Not to mention the fact that if your company car allowance, BIK and emissions, depending on what market you're watching this video in, it will open up new doors to you, excuse the pun, to just get around in something that's really clean and has lots of space in the back. It's by no means sexy, that's for sure, but what the MG5 EV commercial is practical. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.